In August 2024, a wildfire tore through the western edge of Grand County, Colorado. For 6 days, flames raged across forgotten trails, blackening pine forests and choking the air with ash. It was brutal, but not unusual. Not in a state where fire season came like clockwork. What made this one different wasn't the size. It was what it uncovered. On the 7th morning, as smoke clung low over the earth and heat still shimmered from the ground, a forestry crew stumbled on something strange. A portion of the hillside had collapsed, scorched dirt sinking into a symmetrical depression too perfect to be natural. At the center, a patch of rusted steel, barely visible beneath layers of soot and stone. They expected old mining equipment, maybe a forgotten culvert. What they found instead was a sealed hatch. Corrugated metal melted at the seams. Faded stenciling marked it MCC 12. No record of it existed in the current geological maps. 3 hours later, officials from the Colorado Division of Reclamation cracked it open. The air inside exhaled, hot, damp, and wrong. A narrow shaft descended into shadow. 30 feet down, they found a plastic grocery bag. Inside, a faded red wallet. And a name. Megan Doyle. Issued June 2nd, 1993. She had vanished alongside her fiancé Ryan Strickland over 30 years ago. No bodies, no car, no leads. Until now, what lay inside the shaft would unravel a mystery that had haunted Colorado for decades and reveal a pattern darker than anyone imagined. But Megan's story didn't end with her disappearance. It began the moment the fire burned hot enough to uncover what someone had buried deep beneath the mountain and hoped no one would ever find. In the summer of 1993, Megan Doyle and Ryan Strickland were just two 20-somethings in love with mountains, music, and each other. Megan was 22, with sun-bright hair and a quiet charm that made people feel safe around her. She worked as an assistant at a preschool in Boulder, took long walks with her mother on Sundays, and wrote poetry in the margins of grocery receipts. Ryan, 25, was studying environmental science at Colorado State. He was tall, curly-haired, and always in an oversized flannel. He loved hiking maps, folk guitar, and reading out loud while Megan rested her head on his shoulder. They weren't reckless. They weren't spontaneous adventurers chasing storms. They were careful. They planned. Their final weekend was supposed to be a short escape, a Friday through Sunday trip through the Western Rockies. They'd rented a 1993 white Ford Tempo from a local agency and made a reservation at a Bureau of Land Management, BLM, cabin near Mirror Lake. Megan even called her mother before they left, promising to check in by Sunday night. They packed a canvas backpack with trail gear, granola bars, a Polaroid camera, and one of Ryan's spiral notebooks. The plan was simple: drive to Granby, fuel up, and check in at the cabin by 2 p.m. On August 21st, 1993, at 11:27 a.m., they were caught on surveillance at a Shell station. The receipt showed $14.22 in unleaded gas, paid in cash. The clerk didn't remember them. The footage was grainy, their faces slightly blurred, but unmistakable. Megan was wearing a canvas jacket, Ryan a blue plaid shirt. They looked relaxed, ordinary. Then, nothing. They never checked in, never returned the car, never called home. Search crews were deployed Monday morning after Megan's mother reported them missing. Helicopters scanned the forest. Rangers swept trailheads. Volunteers stapled flyers to trees. But no sign of them was ever found. No broken branches. No tire marks. No signs of struggle. It was as if the road swallowed them whole. The only evidence ever recovered was circumstantial. A torn flannel sleeve found 6 miles from Mirror Lake a week later. DNA was inconclusive. A possible sighting of a similar car near Little Elk Creek, later debunked. Their disappearance was classified as a probable hiking accident, an unfortunate but not uncommon fate in Colorado's unforgiving terrain. Over the years, the file thinned. Leads dried up. The case went cold. But not for everyone. Detective Erin Vance wasn't part of the investigation in 1993. She was in high school when Megan vanished. But when she transferred to the Boulder Cold Case Unit in 2021, hers was the first file she pulled from the archives. Something about Megan's handwriting in an old envelope. The way Ryan had meticulously written Mirror Lake Trail map. Final, on a dog-eared paper. It haunted her. Couples went missing. It happened. But this one didn't feel random. They had cash, maps, plans. They left no digital trail, but they weren't running from anything either. No fights, no debt, no history of mental illness or risky behavior. Just two people who disappeared without a trace between a gas station and a cabin never reached. Vance requested the case be quietly reopened in 2022. She retraced their steps, interviewed retired rangers, scanned weather records. She even tried to reach the cabin's caretaker, who died in 2008. Nothing new surfaced. Until the fire. When that hatch surfaced in 2024, sealed with rusted steel, buried beneath layers of earth, and labeled with a mining code decommissioned in the 60s, everything changed. Because the moment Vance heard the name Megan Doyle on the license recovered from the wallet, she didn't just see an old photo of a smiling girl with a bird necklace. She saw a timeline snapping back into motion. This wasn't a hiking accident. This was a vanishing designed to look like one. August 18, 2024, Grand County, Colorado. The fire had raged for 6 days. Officials labeled it a moderate ecological disaster. Thousands of acres of forest were reduced to blackened trunks and smoking soil. For the Colorado Division of Reclamation, it was cleanup day. An unglamorous sweep of collapsed ridgelines, scorched basins, and terrain made dangerously unstable by the heat. Cal Newell was driving the final access route just after 9 a.m., alone in a 2-seat utility truck. He wasn't expecting to find anything unusual. Most of the area had been cleared by drone the day before. But just past a half-fallen ridge on the western slope, something caught his eye. It wasn't just the sinkhole, a shallow dip in the earth where the soil had slumped. It was the shape, too round, too symmetrical, and the color, steel, rusted and heat-warped, peeking through the dirt like a scab torn open. Cal stopped the truck. The air outside was thick with smoke and dust. He approached the depression slowly, boots crunching over charred pine needles. Up close, the outline became clear. A hatch, corrugated steel, circular, sealed with heavy bolts and decades of dirt. Around the rim, remnants of melted rubber and blackened edges suggested it had been deeply buried, intentionally. He knelt, brushed back soot, and uncovered faded yellow stenciling. MCC 12. Closed. 1966. Mines like these were supposed to be mapped, capped, and decommissioned. But MCC 12 didn't appear on any of the modern geological maps. There were no warning signs, no fencing, no entry logs. Cal radioed back. "Get McNair. We've got something sealed." 3 hours later, McNair arrived with 2 state officers, a mining bureau official, and tools. A bolt cutter, a crowbar, a pry kit. The hatch resisted, as if it didn't want to be opened. When it finally gave way, the seal let out a sound like a breath being exhaled from the mountain itself, hot, stale, damp. Unnatural. Flashlights pierced the shaft below. The entry sloped down at a steep angle. Wood beams lined the tunnel, some rotted, some collapsed. The air was dense, humid, unwelcoming. 30 feet in, something caught the light. A plastic grocery bag. Preserved by the sealed environment, the plastic had barely aged. Inside, a red wallet, warped and water-stained. The driver's license was still visible through the inner pouch. Megan Doyle, born 1971, issued June 2nd, 1993. The men fell silent. The name meant nothing to them, but they flagged it, bagged the wallet, and uploaded the GPS coordinates to the state incident database. By protocol, the local law enforcement agency nearest to a major personal item recovery is notified for historical record matching. That's how it landed on the desk of Detective Erin Vance at the Boulder Police Department Cold Case Unit less than 18 hours later. She was sitting at her desk when the notification chimed on her monitor. Recovered ID match to missing persons case #CC 2193. Subject: Megan Doyle. Vance froze. She'd seen that file 100 times. Reread the statements. Rewalked the timeline. Inherited it from a retired investigator who said, "It's a ghost, but a persistent one." Now that ghost had a location. She called the field team, packed her gear, and headed straight for the burn zone. The drive north was smothered in smoke. Highway 40 looked like a corridor carved through the remains of an ash-covered dream. Burned-out ridges stood like skeletons. The earth was gray, silent. Vance passed the perimeter checkpoint and walked the last quarter-mile on foot, cautiously. The hatch was now surrounded by temporary lighting and yellow tape. The reclamation crew was packing up. Cal met her at the fold-out table, where tagged evidence bags lay sealed. "You got here fast," he said. "I haven't slept," she replied. He handed her the bag. "This is what we found. There's more." He gestured toward the shaft. We pushed a camera further. Found a backpack, a jacket, an old Canon camera, still sealed in a plastic container. Vance's breath caught. She took the camera bag carefully, opening it with gloved fingers. The Canon logo was faded but intact. She unscrewed the plastic film canister inside. The roll was slightly warped but whole. "We'll process it in Boulder," she said quietly. "There's one more thing," Cal added. "You need to see the video." A monitor was mounted in the back of a truck. The footage was rough, grainy, shaking as the GoPro descended on a flexible pole. Timber supports cracked. Dust particles floated like ash in the air. Then metal. A frame. A grill. A steering wheel. Vance stepped forward. There, deep inside the shaft, half buried under debris, was the shell of a vehicle. White, crumpled, twisted sideways into the walls of the mine. One door had been torn off. A strip of fabric still clung to the passenger seat. Cal's voice was low. "We ran the VIN from the old rental records. It's a match." Vance stared at the screen. Her heart pounded. It was Megan and Ryan's car. A 1993 white Ford Tempo, sealed in a shaft that was never supposed to be opened. This wasn't just a missing persons case anymore. It was something far darker. Something buried, and meant to stay that way. Detective Erin Vance stared at the faded missing person flyer pinned above her desk. Megan Doyle and Ryan Strickland, missing since August 21st, 1993. Two passport-style photos, both slightly off-center, both still young and bright. Megan's hair sun-bleached and shoulder-length, a small nose ring glinting beneath her smile. Ryan had a loose grin and wore a flannel shirt that looked one size too big, curls framing his face. They looked like they belonged in a photo album, not a case file. Erin had inherited the file 3 years ago when she transferred from violent crimes to cold cases. Back then, she didn't expect much. Cold cases didn't close. They just slowed. They drifted into forgotten corners, stuck between incomplete leads and gut feelings that never turned into evidence. But this one lingered. Maybe it was Megan's handwriting in the cabin rental forms. Maybe it was the way Ryan had highlighted each planned stop on a folded paper map in purple ink. There was care in their plan, intention, and yet they'd vanished as if the trail itself had eaten them alive. At first glance, it fit the profile of a backcountry accident. Colorado's remote terrain had a way of swallowing people. Ridges that collapsed, trail markers that disappeared in the snow, wildlife that left no trace. But something about Megan and Ryan had always made Aaron pause. They had no history of erratic behavior, no signs of running. Megan worked in early childhood education and had volunteered every summer at a children's reading program. Ryan was a graduate student, writing his thesis on forest regeneration. Neither had enemies. Their families weren't feuding. Their bank accounts showed no red flags. No one ever came forward with a grudge, and yet no one ever came forward with answers either. Their last confirmed location had been the Shell station in Granby, August 21st, 1993. The receipt was time-stamped 11:27 a.m. Their next expected stop was a BLM cabin near Mirror Lake. They never arrived. No sightings, no calls, no car. The road between those 2 points had been searched multiple times over the years, by rangers, volunteers, drones, even dogs. Not a single clue surfaced. Until now, Aaron flipped open the case file. The wallet found in the shaft had been officially logged by the evidence team. Megan's license was worn but unmistakable. So were the initials etched on the camera bag. R+M. The vehicle, a 1993 Ford Tempo, was a confirmed match to their rental. Even the film canister had a faint sticky label reading, Mirror Weekend. This wasn't debris. This was confirmation. She grabbed her notebook, opened a clean page, and drew a new timeline. August 21st, 1993, gas station, confirmed, August 21st, 1993. 2 p.m. cabin check-in missed, August 2024, shaft discovery MCC, 12 August 2024. Personal items recovered. Then she drew a single line branching off from the timeline. Diagonal, dark, uncertain. A deviation. A decision made somewhere between gas and forest. A road not mapped. Why had they ended up near MCC? 12. That shaft wasn't on their route. It was miles west of Mirror Lake and even further off official trails. The mine had been decommissioned in 1966 and sealed completely by 1971. No one was supposed to access it, ever. That meant either they got lost in a place no one ever accidentally wandered into, or someone took them there. She turned to her laptop and pulled up archived ranger logs from August 1993. No entries for hikers matching Megan and Ryan's description. No trail reports. No wildlife incidents. No radio calls. Just silence. Silence. She hated that word more than any other in her line of work. It pretended to mean peace, but it was always what came after something terrible. Her desk phone buzzed. She answered on the first ring. "Detective Vance," said the voice on the other end. "It's Cal Newell from Reclamation. You said to call if we found anything else." "We did." She grabbed a pen. "Go ahead." We cleared more of the shaft. About 30 feet further in, found a blue backpack. It's canvas. Inside were a rusted flashlight, compass, a flannel jacket, and a Canon AE-1 camera. Film still inside. It's sealed. Her grip tightened on the phone. We also found a path deeper. Collapsed wood supports. Looks like the tunnel was reinforced. You'll want to see it yourself. "I'm on my way," she said, grabbing the file and keys in one motion. "Text me GPS." She locked her office, walked to the elevator, and took a deep breath. This wasn't a theory anymore. This wasn't a maybe. This was a door that had stayed closed for 31 years. And it had just opened. The shaft had given them the car, the film, and the backpack. But the surrounding terrain, what remained of it, still held secrets. And on August 21st, the search perimeter was widened. Detective Aaron Vance arrived just after sunrise. The forest around Shaft MCC 12 was still smoldering. Charred bark hung in strips from blackened trunks. The air smelled like smoke layered over something deeper, older. It clung to the soil and stained the wind. A young forensic officer named Maddie Cook met her by the staging tent. "We've marked a strange pattern northeast of the main shaft," she said. "It's deliberate." Aaron followed her across a jagged slope of burned-out pine. The forest here was only partially destroyed. The heat had stripped the trees bare, but hadn't fully leveled them. That's where they saw the first marking. A triangle, notched into the bark of a tree. A vertical slash down the center. 30 feet later, another. Same shape, same distance apart. Old-style trail signs, Maddie said. Not ranger issue. Could have been used by someone who didn't want to be followed by official maps. They found 6 trees marked this way. On the 7th, there was something different, an axe shape carved into the trunk. And just below it, beneath layers of ash and brush, a rectangular outline made of flat stones. Aaron crouched and brushed it clean, a sheet of scorched plywood. "Help me lift it," she said. Beneath it was a trapdoor, rusted, barely attached. It creaked open with a groan to reveal a narrow staircase descending into the earth. Not rock, not concrete, timber, hand-cut and warped from time. They followed it with flashlights drawn. 20 feet below, they reached the bottom. It was a single-room dugout, small, no wider than a storage shed. The walls were reinforced with wooden beams, but the floor was dirt. Inside were objects that told a story. Blankets folded into a corner, a rusted kerosene heater, empty food cans, and a faded Coleman water jug. It looked like a survival cache. But there were signs of something worse. There was a desk at the far end, splintered, warped, but still standing. Inside the drawer, wrapped in an old military scarf, were 4 items: a rusted pocketknife, a dog-eared leather journal, a necklace, metal bird pendant on a frayed cord, and a Polaroid photo face down. Aaron turned it over. Megan Doyle, sitting on a log, hands in her lap, eyes lowered. A figure, tall, out of focus, stood behind her, barely visible in the depth of field. It wasn't just a photo. It was a moment held in place. Aaron opened the journal next. At first, it was empty. 20, maybe 30 pages of blank paper. Then the handwriting started, small, cramped, jagged. Written in pencil. No punctuation. No dates. But full of implication. August 23rd, she stopped crying today. He says that means we're making progress. August 25th, the boy keeps coughing. He says we have to keep going. I told him. He doesn't have a home anymore. August 28th. I hate the sound they make when they sleep. The entries weren't signed. The grammar was broken, but the tone, detached, cold, suggested someone not just documenting their actions, but trying to convince themselves it was justified. Aaron flipped deeper into the journal. One entry was circled in red. The woman with the bird necklace. She didn't scream when the door shut. She just stared at me. I think she knew. Aaron looked again at the necklace. It was the same one Megan wore in the film roll. That journal had belonged to whoever had been keeping them down here. Maddie was scanning the walls when she stopped. "You'll want to see this," she said. Near the desk, a panel of wood was etched with faint markings. Initials, symbols. One stood out. Bird 1993. Aaron reached into her evidence bag and flipped to the film roll photos. The term bird had never appeared before. Not in witness statements, not in any correspondence. But now it surfaced here, in writing and an artifact. Megan wore the necklace. Megan was in the photo. Megan was the first. "Bird," Aaron whispered. "He renamed her." "Why rename her?" Maddie asked. Aaron didn't answer right away, because the answer was too disturbing to say out loud. This wasn't just a hideout. It was a holding room, a place for someone to erase identities, replace them with labels, track behavior, Condition responses. She opened the journal again. Near the back, another name appeared. Stag resisted had to separate. Maple was quiet, kept her longer. Each name was paired with no dates. Just feelings, observations, notes like someone logging a project. A pattern. He was studying them, Aaron said softly. Documenting, naming, measuring, like trophies. Maddie asked. No, Aaron replied. Like experiments. And Megan, as far as this journal told them, was the first entry. By August 26, 2024, the case was no longer just a cold file. It was an active manhunt, albeit for a ghost no one had ever officially seen. Detective Aaron Vance stood in front of a multi-agency task force, projecting images of the journal pages onto a dim screen. There were no photos of the suspect, no fingerprints, no DNA, but there were names: Bird, Stag, Maple. And each one whispered of a ritual, a system, a twisted methodology. What we're looking at, Aaron told the room, is not just abduction. This individual operated with routine, location familiarity, and long-term concealment. He didn't snatch and flee. He stayed. He prepared. And he recorded everything. She flipped to the map, showing the burn zone, MCC, 12, and the hidden bunker. He used old ranger markings to direct or misdirect. And he was familiar with structures that haven't existed on maps since the 1960s. A hand rose from the back. A park historian, brought in for environmental context. Could he have been part of a prior reclamation crew? Or someone whose family lived near the mines? Aaron nodded. That's the leading theory. Someone who had historical access, before modernization erased the records. And based on journal entries referencing multiple victims, this wasn't isolated to 93. He's been active longer. The room fell silent. The journal wasn't a single-year record. It was layered, mixed paper stock, pencils that varied in graphite quality. The entries spanned years, maybe decades. That same afternoon, the team interviewed a former ranger named Albert Giles, now 81, who had worked the western Grand County area from 1968 to 1982. When asked about old shafts near MCC 12, he rubbed his chin and muttered something that made the room stop. There was a kid, back in 78, used to follow our crews. Quiet boy, blonde, wouldn't say a word unless you asked him twice. Lived off-road with his father in a cabin with no plumbing. We called him Ghost Jake, 'cause he'd vanish into the woods. I always assumed they moved. Aaron leaned forward. Did he ever identify himself? Giles shook his head. Never gave a name. But he'd show up near our temporary sites. Knew the trails better than we did. A lead. Finally, cross-referencing regional records, the team found a permit from 1977 for a man named Eldon R. Hask, who had registered a trapping cabin lease 4 miles west of MCC 12. The lease had expired in 1980. No follow-ups, no taxes, no forwarding address. A visit to the county archive turned up a photocopied ID. Eldon Hask, born 1932. One dependent, no wife listed. The photo showed a gaunt man with hollow cheeks, unkempt beard, and eyes that seemed to pull inward. On the back, son, Jacob Hask, born circa 1967. There was no birth certificate for Jacob Hask, no school enrollment, no medical records, but there were patterns, surveillance logs near wildlife stations, reports of a tall male, mid-40s, seen walking alone near trap lines long abandoned. When Aaron laid out a composite sketch, blending blurry outlines from enhanced photos and witness descriptions, it formed a rough figure. 6 feet 2 inches, angular build, long arms, possibly a limp in the right leg. Always seen near dusk. Never approached. Never caught on game cams. But he was always in the trees. On August 28th, A break came from the most unlikely place, a podcast listener. The Boulder PD had quietly released vague information about an unresolved historical case involving the Mirror Lake area. A woman named Leah Danner called in. She said her uncle, a retired geology professor, had once mentioned a man he met while camping near Grand County in 2002. He said the man wasn't dressed like a hiker, Leah explained. He had an old ranger jacket, but it didn't fit. The guy said he was watching for animal movement, but didn't carry binoculars or a pack. Just a canvas bag. Uncle Cliff said he was polite but off, like he hadn't had a conversation in years. When asked for a name, she paused. He didn't give one, but he said something weird, called the forest his lineage, like it raised him. That statement struck Aaron like a wire pulled tight. The forest raised him. He wasn't using it for cover. It was home, a parent, a school, a shield. The man, Jacob Hask, if he still lived, knew how to move through terrain like a memory. The mines, the shafts, the trees. None of it was wilderness to him. It was architecture. Designed. Familiar. Aaron returned to the shaft bunker later that day. The forest had begun regrowing already, tufts of green pushing through ash. She stood at the edge of the collapsed structure and imagined the boy, watching rangers from the trees, mimicking their patterns, copying trail marks. She imagined him listening at night to forgotten shafts creak, memorizing the way echoes moved. This wasn't improvisation. This was inheritance. And somewhere, maybe not far from here, that same man now watched the investigators as if they were trespassers in his house. The hunt had begun, but it wasn't him being hunted. Not yet. On August 29th, search teams discovered a metal container buried beneath 6 inches of scorched soil, less than 100 yards from the hidden bunker. It was olive drab, military surplus, the kind used decades ago to store radio parts or small arms. But this one had been repurposed. Inside were 6 labeled cassette tapes. Each bore a handwritten name: bird, maple, stag, fawn, pine, dust. The handwriting matched the journal. Same sharp pressure, same erratic spacing. A voice once trapped in graphite had now spoken onto tape. The tapes were delivered to the Audio Forensics Lab at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. The team handled them like radioactive material. They had to be cleaned, magnetically stabilized, and digitized before playback. Detective Aaron Vance was present when the first tape played. A soft hiss opened the recording, followed by silence. Then footsteps, gravel, crunching under slow movement. A dragging sound, possibly a limp. Then a voice. Male. Calm. Low. Unhurried. Subject 1. Code name. Bird. She asked for her name back today. I told her we don't use names here. She didn't respond after that. Aaron froze. It was her. Megan Doyle. The voice continued. She hums when she thinks no one is listening. Same 3 notes. I asked her why. She didn't answer. But she made eye contact. That's new. She may be adapting. The tone wasn't cruel. It was clinical, like a scientist recording lab notes. Not about a person, but about a specimen. Food intake reduced again. Not due to illness. Resistance. She will need correction soon. The second tape was worse. Subject 3. Stag. Loud. Talks too much. Wants to escape. I told him the door only opens if he learns the rules. He kicked the cot. Said I was lying. That's all right. Some are harder to unmake. Aaron leaned forward. Unmake? The analyst paused the tape. We've run voice profiling on the speaker. Mid-50s to early 60s. Northern Colorado accent. No vocal tremors. Calm respiratory rate. Probably rehearsed. It continued. I changed Stag's light pattern. He's disoriented now. Better. easier to teach. Light pattern. It dawned on Aaron that this wasn't just physical captivity. It was sensory manipulation. Megan, Ryan, the others, they hadn't simply been held. They were studied under stress, disoriented, observed, stripped of identity until they became symbols. Maple, fawn, pine, dust. Nature names. Non-threatening, almost poetic, but they masked something much darker. On tape 4, subject 5, Pine, didn't resist. She smiled when I brought the journal in, asked if she could write. I said yes, but only in third person. She called herself a leaf. A leaf! Aaron jotted the phrase down. There had been an entry in the journal. The leaf wrote again today. She said the wind tells her stories. I didn't correct her. Pine was real. And she'd internalized the code. Stockholm Syndrome didn't seem strong enough a term. This was identity erosion. Behavior reshaping. Not through force, but through repetition, deprivation, suggestion. And now they had a voice. Someone who had watched these people, renamed them, studied them, then stored his results in words and cassette ribbons. But it was tape 6 that broke the room's silence. Subject 1. Bird. Final session. She did not respond today. No words, no movement, but her eyes remained open the entire time. Aaron's hand clenched into a fist. I told her the forest doesn't forget, that names are noise. She blinked once. I took that as understanding. She was the first, the only one who looked through me instead of at me. A pause. Then, they say some birds fly until their wings tear. But that's not true. Some birds simply fold. Silence again. Then a sound not heard before. A latch opening. Fabric shifting. And then, for just a moment, a woman's voice. Faint. Barely audible, but clear enough. My name is Megan. Click. The tape ended. Aaron turned away, eyes burning. She had spent years with the name Megan Doyle typed on a forgotten case file. A missing person. A cold statistic. But now she had a voice. And not just any voice, but a defiant one. Even in the face of complete erasure. She had tried to speak. To reclaim herself. The team played the tapes again, this time analyzing background noise. Water dripping, metal creaks, echoes. One consistent anomaly surfaced. On every recording, a specific echo frequency repeated every 11.3 seconds. That's structural, the analyst said. It's the echo of something mechanical. Maybe a pressure valve could help narrow down where he lived. Or where he's still operating. For Aaron, it wasn't just about location anymore. It was about sequence, pattern. There was a method to the names, the journals, the tapes. Each victim wasn't random. Each was part of a ritual. And Megan, the one he named Bird, had started it all. Now, 31 years later, her voice had finally made it out of the forest. By early September 2024, the name Jacob Hask had become central to a web of disappearances long considered isolated incidents. But Detective Aaron Vance now saw something different, something horrifyingly intentional. It began with old maps. The Colorado Geological Survey maintained decades of trail overlays, mining data, and terrain erosion patterns. Aaron cross-referenced these with GPS coordinates from historical missing persons cases. Young hikers, solo campers, vanishing couples. Many had been dismissed as accidents. Bear attacks, lost footing, exposure. Bodies rarely found. Sometimes gear was recovered, but not always. When Aaron plotted them onto a single master map, a shape emerged. Not random, not scattered. A curved arc. 6 locations spanning from north of Granby to just past Echo Lake. And all within a 3-mile radius of defunct ranger cabins or unmapped mining entrances. She stared at the pattern, chilled. He was circling, she whispered. Each site like a spoke on a wheel. returning inward. For years this man, likely Jacob, had hunted not with chaos, but with a looped rhythm. Each victim from a different year, a different profile, but always the same terrain, and always the same result: silence. The FBI joined the investigation formally on September 3rd. Agent Dorian Price was assigned as liaison, a tall, methodical man with a background in geographic profiling and serial behavior analytics. His first words in the briefing set the tone. "You're not looking for a drifter. You're looking for someone with infrastructure, base of operations, deep woods logistics, and psychological investment in territory." Dorian laid out a startling theory. Jacob, or whoever the voice on the tape was, had most likely created multiple bunkers, not just the one near MCC 12. If he had journals, tapes, and routines, then he needed places to stage, to isolate, to discard. The team searched for other locations, areas with similar tree markings, soil depressions, old supply caches. Drone surveys identified 3 possible zones within the Ark's path. 2 were inaccessible due to wildfire debris. The third was reachable on foot. On September 5th, Aaron and a wilderness unit hiked 5 hours through dense timberland north of Shadow Mountain Lake. They followed no formal trail, just intuition, compass bearings, and canopy breaks. Then they found it. Another shaft, smaller than MCC 12, unmarked, half covered in pine needles and decades of decay. This one lacked a hatch. It had simply been disguised under a false floor of braced wood planks. Inside was a shallow cavity, 8 feet deep. The scent of old oil and mildew hit them immediately. A single lantern hung from a chain, long dead batteries inside. But it wasn't empty. In the corner was a weatherproof storage bin. Inside, clothing, a rusted camping stove, a Ziploc bag filled with faded Polaroids. Aaron spread the photos on the ground, one by one. These weren't like the Megan tapes. They weren't posed. They weren't frightened. They were surveillance. Photos taken from behind trees, through bushes, across lakes. People eating, setting up tents, smiling, unaware. The timestamps, when readable, spanned decades: 1989, 1995, 2003, even one as recent as 2018. The victims? Unknown. One photo stopped her cold. A family camping by the edge of a stream. 2 children. A mother sitting on a cooler. The father tending a fire. Aaron stared at the man's face. Something about him. She ran the image through facial recognition software that night. It matched a man reported missing in 2004. Benjamin Kerr, vanished with his family on a camping trip. Case dismissed as drowning, despite no bodies ever found. Aaron revisited the Kerr case file. Same search zone, same ranger district. No follow-ups, no footprints. It had been Jacob. He'd been watching them. Not just the ones he took, but the ones he rejected. Dorian offered a chilling conclusion. He's a predator with restraint. That makes him more dangerous. It means he thinks, he evaluates, and he returns. It also meant there were others. Not just Megan, not just Ryan. Dozens, maybe. Aaron met with a behavioral analyst specializing in isolated predator psychology. Dr. Carla Mears offered insight. These types don't need trophies. They need silence. They need the world to not know, because once it knows, the ecosystem is disrupted. They thrive on control, and when that's challenged, they escalate. Escalation. The fire had brought light. Exposure. The investigation had ripped away his cover. The bunker breached, the journal uncovered, the tapes played. Now, he'd either run or respond. Aaron wasn't sure which terrified her more. On September 9th, the task force launched what they called the Pulse Sweep. Using thermal drones, infrared scanners, and seismic sounders, they began scanning deep terrain within the arc, looking for recent disturbances, heat signatures, or movement inconsistent with wildlife. For 3 days, nothing. Then on the 4th, at 2:14 a.m., a motion sensor picked up faint movement less than 2 miles from the second shaft. It triggered again at 2:16. Then silence. When the search team reached the zone, they found only footprints, bare, adult-sized, deeply pressed into damp soil. No direction, no tools, no shelter, just one clear detail. The prints were fresh, no more than an hour old. Aaron stood in that patch of forest, heart pounding, eyes scanning the trees. She had the terrible sense she wasn't just tracking him anymore. He was watching them too, from somewhere close. And if the pattern held, he wouldn't stay silent much longer. September 11th, 2024. The sun hadn't yet risen when the radio crackled inside base camp. A ranger's voice came through, urgent, shaking. Fire. Uncontrolled. Coordinates match sector Echo 9. Echo 9 was just outside the sweep perimeter, a region previously cleared due to lack of thermal readings. But now, it was burning. Within 30 minutes, flames danced in tall spirals across a dry stretch of lodgepole pine. Smoke towered like columns, visible even from town. The blaze was fast, but not natural. Not a lightning strike. Not sun on glass. This fire had been started, and when the teams arrived, they found something else. At the center of the burn, between half-melted rocks and blackened roots, lay a circle of scorched earth, oddly untouched by the fire's natural path. It was intentional, controlled, and at its core, planted firmly in the dirt, was a steel post. Tied to it with weather-worn rope was a human skull. Clean, bleached, balanced. Around the base, in charcoal strokes, someone had written a circle of names: bird, stag, maple, fawn, pine, dust. Then, outside the circle, ash. It was a name never seen before. Not in the journal. Not on the tapes. A new victim? Or a message? Aaron Vance stood at the edge of the burned ring. He wanted us to find this, she said. He wanted it now. Dorian Price crouched beside the skull, examining the bindings. These ropes, they were soaked in accelerant. He didn't just burn a place. He burned a message. The forensic team confirmed the remains had been placed after the fire began, which meant Jacob Hask, if it was still him, had been there. Recently. Watching. Waiting. The next day, another package arrived at headquarters. No postmark. Hand-delivered. Slipped beneath the front security gate. Inside, a burned Polaroid, and a note written in sharp red ink. The photo showed the burned forest, viewed from above. It had been taken from the tree line. The note read. Ash didn't scream either. The handwriting matched the journal. It was his. This wasn't a retreat. This was a re-entry. Jacob, or whoever the man behind the voice was, had accepted the challenge. For 30 years, he had remained a shadow, feeding his rituals in silence. But the fire, the search, the attention, it had pulled him into the light. And now he was responding in kind. Investigators traced the possible path of the new fire. Satellite heat maps showed a figure moving through brush in the hours before ignition, appearing and disappearing, as if hugging terrain. Never once caught on clear footage, but always circling back to the same zone. He was still near Echo 9, still watching, still building his story. Aaron stood again at the names. Bird, stag, maple, fawn, pine, dust, now ash. 7 names, she murmured. But only 2 we've confirmed. What if the others weren't gone? What if Ash wasn't a victim? What if it was him? Suddenly, it made sense. Jacob had never referred to himself. Not in the tapes. Not in the journal. But Ash, burnt, reduced, erased, was the only name outside the circle. He had finally inserted himself into the ritual. Was this guilt, pride, an ending, or a beginning? Dr. Carla Mears, the profiler, offered a chilling theory. By naming himself, he either believes his work is complete or that he's moved into a new phase. This could be a swan song or a declaration. The problem? He was rewriting the script, and no one knew what came next. 2 days later, another tape was found, left outside a ranger station, hidden beneath a pinecone pile. No name, just a title scratched onto the plastic casing. Echoes. On it, the same voice. Only this time, it didn't address a subject. It addressed the listener. You wanted to understand, but understanding means losing your place. That's what they never teach you. Birds don't leave nests. Nests leave birds. I didn't take them. I received them. Aaron froze. He wasn't confessing. He was preaching. Names rot. I named them new. I watched them transform. You call it horror. I call it clarity. Then faintly, like wind through needles, the forest raised me. It remembers me, and it remembers you. Static. Then a final whisper. Follow the trees, not the trails. Click. The tape ended. The case remains open, active, but no new sightings have emerged since the fire. Megan Doyle's remains were partially recovered and given a quiet burial by her surviving relatives. Ryan Strickland was never found, nor were the others. To this day, the FBI maintains a full-time presence in Grand County, but locals speak in hushed tones, not about the crimes, but about the man. Some say he's dead, consumed by the fire he started. Others say he walks the tree line still, barefoot, watching, waiting. What's certain is this: the forest kept his secret for 3 decades. It may still be keeping more.